The actual psychology of what grabs people's attention, how do you make them click? That's just one of the core components of growing an online business. But the cool thing about psychology is that it's never going to change. It's been around for 100,000 years. People aren't changing in our lifetime. In the next couple thousand years, all psychology is going to be the same. Just finding people who are creating good content and who use good formats is kind of like the cheat code for writing good titles. Any question that you have about YouTube can be answered by
Jake Thomas. You've been analyzing hundreds, if not thousands, of viral videos, and you've built up a database of, I think, over 600 YouTube titles. Tell me, why the big focus on titles? Why is that so important to you?
Yeah, we're at almost 1,500 now. So
Oh,
my
wow.
website is a little dated there, but yeah, I mean, I love psychology, and just the fact that YouTube titles, they're it's one of the like highest leverage skills that you can have on, to grow your internet business, to grow your YouTube channel. I mean, they're just like 7 to 10 words, but if you have a good YouTube title, that could be the difference between 1,000 views or 100,000 views just by changing those 7 to 10 words. So there's like infinite leverage on being good at YouTube titles. And then there's also just there's so much crossover. Like if you know what gets somebody to click and what people find interesting, then you can use those same skills for YouTube intros, YouTube thumbnails, YouTube shorts. You can use it for like Twitter, LinkedIn, email, subject lines, blog posts, really everything. Once you know how to grab people's attention and how to get them to click, that's just one of the core components of growing an online business.
Awesome. So, how did you get into this? Because everybody has to write a title, but in your case, you've decided to just hone in on just the titles, and you've made a name around being one of the world's top experts on just writing titles for YouTube videos. Tell me, how did you get into that?
I think I'm the only one on the only YouTube title nerd, which is awesome. As a business owner, being the only person in this space is great. But it's so I worked for a fishing company, and it was my dream job. And I was pretty much just like sitting at home watching fishing videos all day and then publishing those on YouTube. But when I first got that job, my boss was like, "Hey, like the title is the most important thing. Like if nobody clicks on your videos, on our videos, then we will have wasted all that time making that video because no one's going to watch it. We're also going to miss out on all leads, all sales, viewers, subscribers." So he's like, no pressure, but like there's a lot writing on if you can get people to click by writing a good title. And I almost like when I first got started, I was so bad that I almost got fired from that job
Oh,
because
okay.
I didn't know, like, I was like, shoot, how do you write a good YouTube title? And we published every day, or actually we published twice a day at that time. And every single day at like 3 o'clock, I would send him like, all right, here's the video going live today. Here are the kind of like 5 different title ideas I'm thinking of. What do you think? And he would kind of bash them, and then he would come up with like a much better title within like 5 minutes. And I'm like, man, how did you do that? And eventually, I slowly figured it out, and I'm like, man, this is such a valuable skill, and I like psychology. I love just thinking about how much leverage you have by just changing a couple of words. So I was really mad that this was such a big weakness for me. And like once I saw how valuable it was, that I kind of I was determined to figure it out. And then once I finally started to kind of making some traction, figuring some stuff out, I decided to start a newsletter because I was like I was talking to our fishing coaches every morning, and I'd be like, "Hey guys, like here are 5 videos that worked well in like finance niche and the marketing niche and like the health niche. We're actually going to take these and we're going to use these for our fishing channel." And that did really well for us. Our channel started growing. We went from like 75,000 subscribers to like over 200,000 subscribers. I think it took us like 2 years or so.
Nice.
But that started doing well for us internally. So I'm like, well, what if I it doesn't really matter what niche you're in. So what if I try to turn this into a newsletter? And I started writing the newsletter, and people started enjoying it. And then it worked out. I went all in on that, and here we are 5 years later.
Amazing. Yeah, so this just reminded me of my very first gig at copywriting. It was just before I became an entrepreneur. I was still back in New Zealand, and one of my friends was doing, was importing little RC cars, remote control toys and cars, and he was selling it on the eBay equivalent of New Zealand, and he was doing okay sales. And I said, "Hey, I've just done this copywriting course. Let me just," because I noticed the text, the copy for his ads are really bad. And I thought, hey, let me just try this out, see what happens. And it was amazing. We had like three times better results just by changing sometimes very often just the title. It was such an interesting thing. This is like 20 years ago now, but there's something interesting
I love
that.
that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's like magic. It felt like magic, really. But there's something that you often talk about, and it's a little phrase that seems to pop up, or that popped up quite a bit in my research, and that is this little phrase here: "Don't be original when it comes to
Yeah.
titles." So tell me a bit about that, because I think a lot of times we feel like we've got to come up with everything from scratch, and write the world's best and most unique title for our videos. What's the deal with this with "don't be original"? What does that mean?
Yeah. So like I'm learning how to play the piano right now, and I'm not trying to go rip a crazy solo. I'm not trying to be original. I'm trying to play "Mary Had a Little Lamb" and "Happy Birthday," and then once I figure out how to play those, then I'll go through more difficult songs. And then once I know, okay, like this is what makes a good song. This is kind of the basics of what sounds good on the piano. Then I can maybe go and be original if I want, but I'm still more likely to be a successful piano player if I just kind of model what works. So there's kind of like that spectrum of like when you're first getting started, it's so you're going to increase your likelihood of success by modeling what is proven to work by a ton. So like when I said I figured it out for that fishing channel, so what I did was I was started modeling other successful videos. So we would write like I would have like a top water fishing lure review, and I'd be like, oh, like I try to just come up with some crazy title by myself, and they always came out either cringy or clickbaity or stupid or unclear. And so instead, I would look up like blow dryer review or like laptop review, and number one in the search might be like the only laptop you need for developers in 2026. So I'd be like, okay, well, I'm just going to take that title, the only top water lure you need for fishing in Florida in 2026. So just pretty much like stealing that format almost word for word. And then eventually, after I did that 1,000 times, I started to finally understand, oh, like people like when you use open loops and build curiosity, or when you drop in the current year, or when you call out a very specific audience. Like I started to learn those things, and then I started to be a little bit more original sometimes, but oftentimes just kind of sticking to the basics of knowing what works, what's proven to work, and then ideally like just kind of finding something to model, finding a format to model almost one to one, except you're going outside of your niche. And often if you go to a very competitive niche like laptop reviews or something, and you look at what's working, the odds that that video is going to do well is pretty high, because that niche is so saturated and so competitive that only the best titles are going to do well. So that's what I mean by don't be original. Internet, like especially if you're getting started, always find a proven format to model very closely.
You've mentioned previously this. I'm not sure if you still use it, but like a Dream 10 and a Model 10 kind of method that you use for that. Does that relate to modeling from the best? Does that mean like maybe take us through that? Like, do you find that the top 10 in an industry, and then and the top formats? Because I think when you say model, you also mean it could be like the format and structure of the videos. Can you take us through that a little bit more? Because I found that really fascinating.
Yeah, so I got this from Russell Brunson a long time ago, and he had like your dream 100 list, and he said like if you're trying to get customers, like you find out the other 100 people who have your same customers, and then you kind of you build relationships with them, and you do partnerships with them and all sorts of stuff, and that's how you can grow your business. And with YouTube, so I have the Dream 10 and the Model 10. So the Dream 10 is like my top 10 competitors. And these are people that talk about the same topic as me. So what I look at those channels to find out proven topics. And for most educational channels, if you just get like find 5 topics that your channel, that your audience loves, like oftentimes there's not that many more topics that you can successfully talk about. So the job is, how do you figure out how to talk about those 5 things 100 different ways? So that's where I come up. That's where I have the Model 10. So my Dream 10 is I'm finding proven format or proven topics for my Dream 10 for my competitors, and then my Model 10 I'm finding proven formats outside of my niche. So my Model 10 might be, so like when I was working at the fishing channel, I had from my Model 10 would have fitness channels, finance channels, marketing channels, health channels, and ideally they're channels that you like, and pretty much any question that you have about YouTube can be answered by asking your Model 10. So like, how long should my titles be? Like, look at your Dream 10 and your Model 10. What should my thumbnails look like? How many words should be in my thumbnail text? How long should my intros be? How long should my videos be? Pretty much any question you can have about YouTube is to look at them, and then to be what about your thumbnails? Like, how much, like, should my thumbnails be light, or like how many elements should be in my thumbnail? What should should my face be in there? So all those questions that you might have can be answered from your Model 10. But specifically when we're talking about titles and ideas, I like to just look at proven formats. Like if I see, for instance, like the only way to blank, and I see that with 4 or 5 different channels are using that video, and that video's doing well for all those channels, then I'm going to say, all right, well, the only way to catch redfish or something. So that you're looking for formats from your Model 10. So you're remixing your proven topics and your proven formats, and that's how you come up with a bunch of ideas that are more likely to be successful because they're based on proven formats and proven topics.
Just a clarification there, Jack, if you don't mind, with the Dream 10, you mentioned it's like your competitors, that's focusing on, is it people focusing on similar topics to you? Because you mentioned with your fishing channel, you also had like, a fitness channel as part of your Dream 10. Do you just focus on people within your niche, or do you go wider? What's the best practice there?
So I might have misspoke. So for the fishing channel, my Dream 10 was all other fishing channels. So like I have a YouTube channel that talks about how to grow on YouTube. That's all, that's vidIQ, TubeBuddy, Ed Lawrence, 1 of 10, all those Callaway, all those channels. And then for going outside of the niche, like Jeremy Ether has a great fitness channel, and I like how he writes his titles. And how he comes up with his ideas. So I would get formats from him. But yeah, for your Dream 10 competitors that talk about the same topic as you, and then for your Model 10, other channels outside of your niche, but they create content in the same format as you or the same style as you. So like if you have an educational talking head channel, you probably wouldn't want to choose like Mr. Beast or some like vlogging channel, because those are just totally different formats. But ideally, someone who's like, you look at their titles and their thumbnails, and you're like, ooh, I really like the way their style. I'm gonna kind of model them.
Okay, so the Dream 10 is competitor channels. So say you've got a fishing channel, you go and look for the top 10 other fishing channels out there to learn from, to see what's working well for them. But then for the Model 10, it doesn't have to be necessarily in the fishing industry for that particular example. It can be more than that. It can be like, what are the frameworks or models, as you call them, that seem to work really well and that resonates with you as well, and what you're trying to achieve. Does that sound about right? Because so So the Dream 10 is channel specific and competitor specific, whereas the model one is more general. It can be from anywhere.
The Model 10, in an ideal world, you have 10 channels in each list, or maybe maybe more than 10 channels.
Right.
But it's, you're looking for channels that in the Model 10, like, oh, I really like the way that this creator writes their titles. I love their formats. I love their thumbnails. And you can kind of you might have a channel that you only like their thumbnails, but you get inspiration from them. And so this applies to creators all across the spectrum. So I have always been horrible at making thumbnails, and eventually I just copied a thousand thumbnails, and I eventually got a little bit better at it. And then, if I'm telling someone who's just starting a channel, I would say, like, always model somebody very closely, someone whose style you like. But then the other day I was talking to a creator, someone who I really look up to, and they're very, very successful with multiple channels on YouTube. And I was like, hey man, what's your secret? And he's like, I just look for what's worked and I copy what has like proven to work. Like, he
Mm,
doesn't come up with anything new. He looks outside of his niche. He does pretty much what I just talked about, is looking for patterns that appear often, across YouTube, across different niches, because the more often you see it work, the higher the likelihood that you following that pattern as well is going to do well. So,
mm.
so just finding people who are creating good content, and who use good formats, is kind of like the cheat code for writing good titles.
It's interesting how often this comes up in these interviews where, I'm talking to the most successful people in the industry when it comes. Well, I've been focusing on short form video in particular, but it's so interesting how almost every single one of them talks about modeling from the best. You go and look at who's the best in the industry, and then you go and well, not copy them, but copy the strategy maybe, or copy the format, and still be original within that space. But that's really interesting. Now, Jake, I know you're more of a long form guy, and the titles that you've been honing in on is for long form video. But I find this really fascinating because I think for short form, it's the same kind of thing. I'm not sure how much short form folks focus on their titles because it's a scrolling sort of environment. However, short form videos also appear a lot in search, or other places on YouTube, But if we look at the other platforms as well, it's not just on the scrollable, thumb scrolling experience that people see your videos from. They also see your videos and your thumbnails specifically for short form in other places too. So I think that's why I wanted to talk to you about this, because I think there's this whole world of opportunity that people might be missing out on. But what would you say to short form video creators? What do you think? Like, do you think this, looking at your say Dream 10 and Model 10, that could still apply? Because the immediate idea that came to me there was, not even from a title writing perspective, but just from a, finding the top 10 dream guys, dream channels. But then the Model 10 is like the format, because oftentimes with short form, you see people who, at least from the people I've interviewed, they've all been able to find a format that works, and then they just repeat it over and over. So, but when it comes to writing titles in particular for short form, have you done a bit of thinking about that? How might it be different, do you think, for short form?
So yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I especially like, so let's start with search. So when we're thinking about search versus, like, let's say it's like the feed where you're just kind of like mindlessly scrolling, people are looking for they're purposefully looking for an answer to something. So they're going to spend more time reading the title and looking at the thumbnail to see, is this video going to deliver on what I'm looking for? So you can get away with kind of longer titles there. I mean, that's something a lot of people ask me, is about title length. So if you're trying to rank and search longer titles, and you want to make sure that you're making a promise that your audience is excited about when you are, if you're trying to rank and search. So there's that. But then a big thing that I think about is just the kind of the fundamentals and the first principles of like psychology and what actually gets people, what gets people's attention and what gets them to click. So one example of like a psychological concept is like a curiosity gap or an open loop. So if I were to use an open loop, and I'm just going to call it an open loop because that's the way I like to call it. That's the way I first learned about it.
I
But
like that.
if I'm trying to build an open loop in a with words, I might write a title that might say, I wish I knew this before I started my first YouTube channel. So that opens a loop. You're like, oh, what is this? And then you could also just start you could start your short with that as well. And then also that would make a really good email subject line. So if you learn psychology, that can apply to everything. But then also it works for like visuals as well. So one of my favorite thumbnails is this guy hanging from the rafters of a store. So he's like hanging from the roof in like a Walmart, and there's so much tension because like it opens up a loop. He's kind of like, there's something about to happen, and you have to click. You got to see like, what happened. Another thumbnail that comes to mind is like a boulder like rolling down a hill, and somebody's like down at the end of the hill. It's kind of like mid action, so that opens up a loop in the same way that it's saying I wish I knew this, is because it starts a story but it doesn't finish it. There's so much tension. You're like, oh, what does he wish he knew? About starting a YouTube channel, or what is going to happen to this boulder because I see this person is down at the end of the hill, and very obviously this boulder is going to roll down. So if you can
Mm.
just try to think about like, all right, what's actually happening here? Another example is like being counterintuitive. So, if I write a title saying, how I blew up a YouTube channel without publishing videos, it's like, wait, that doesn't make sense. I'm kind of challenging your assumptions. I'm making kind of just a counterintuitive statement. And you could also do the same thing visually. You could kind of put two things together that don't really make sense. Maybe it's like, it's like a golden retriever or a dog with like tiger stripes. You're like, wait, like that's not how I expect things to go, right? So just kind of knowing, the actual psychology of what grabs people's attention, how do you make them click? It is a little bit hard to kind of go from words to visualizations, but if you're like for your script, like just like say counterintuitive things or open a loop when you're in the first sentence of your short, but the cool thing about psychology is that it's never going to change. It's been around for 100,000 years. People aren't changing in our lifetime. In the next couple thousand years, all psychology is going to be the same. It's very platform transferable. It's not exactly the same. Some things work better on other platforms than others, but it's just a great transferable skill. So no matter what platform or what type of content you're creating, learning psychology is definitely one of the skills that you should spend time learning, and one of the skills that you're going to get a lot out of, a high ROI out of learning psychology.
Yeah, and I think that's what I love about your approach is that when you look at the way you come up with titles, it's not as formulaic as you might get from other people talking about it, and I think that's really cool. I mean, sure that maybe there are some formulas, but I think what you have for me is like maybe not formulas, but shortcuts, which I really like. Like, you talk about the three emotions that you need to master. You've talked about the psychology, but you've talked a bit about curiosity there, opening loops. But what are those three emotions, the three main emotions you think people should master when it comes to writing titles?
Yeah, and then just kind of backing up a little bit, when we're thinking about formulas, yes, like if you're a beginner, start with formulas because that's easy. You're going to increase your odds of success. But as you get a little bit more experience, and also as you're kind of evaluating formulas, you're going to start to notice that there's all sorts of different trends and themes that you're seeing, and that's the psychology. And if you can actually more intentionally think about those, like, oh, why does this work? Then you're going to start to accelerate your learning of what makes people click, and how do you grow a YouTube channel, or how do you grow really any business online. So the one thing that I found is if we're just thinking like, all right, high level, what makes a good YouTube title. It's the presence of one, two, or three of the three clickworthy emotions. That's curiosity, fear, and desire. So curiosity is the most powerful of them. It's kind of like a mental mosquito bite. Like if you get bit by a mosquito, you don't want to itch. You don't want to scratch that mosquito bite. You have to scratch that mosquito bite. So curiosity, it kind of plants a question in the audience's mind, and if you do it well, they don't just want to answer that question; they have to answer that question. So that's the most powerful emotion. You have fear, and then so just thinking about like what is your audience scared of? What do they not want? A lot of people think fear is kind of cringy or clickbaity or warmongery. If you can just think about like, all right, my audience, they want to they want to do something. What's going to stop them from doing that? What are they nervous about? What are they scared of? And if you can address those pain points and those problems, then that's a oftentimes is a great way to make interesting content. And then you have desire, which is just knowing your audience's hopes and dreams, and knowing like, all right, so I could make a video titled how to grow a YouTube channel. Like that's cool. Like my audience does want to grow a YouTube channel. However, that video probably isn't going to do well. But if I titled the video how to hit your first 1,000 subscribers, or how I made $1 million on YouTube, if I made that desire a little bit more specific, kind of going after exactly what my audience wants, then that video is more likely to be successful. So those are the three emotions, and it's usually curiosity plus fear or curiosity plus desire. Sometimes you can mix all three, but it's not really about mixing all three. It's about doing one or two really well.
Okay, I'm getting sort of interested here in getting a very hands-on example, because I want to see this in action. If you're open to it, Jake, would you be interested in going through? I just thought of this now, kind of. But would you be interested in going through a previous video of mine? It's a short. It's on my personal
Yes, of
channel.
course.
It hasn't done particularly well, but looking at it and going, if I was and sort of looking at it from maybe assuming this is just before I'm about to post it or publish it, what is the process or steps I would normally go through to create just a banger title for that video? So I'm going to just share my screen, and I'm going to pick probably let me just go to my screen here. So let's go to YouTube, and we'll search for my name, Gideon Shalwick. So I did Pat Flynn's 30-day challenge a while back, and so I created a bunch of videos on productivity, and I try to make it funny or ironic more than funny, and some did okay, but it wasn't. They didn't do amazing. But let's have a look here. So I've got. Can you see my screen, Jake? Before we
Yep.
go further, all right. So I don't know. I've got. Let's take this. I think this one did quite well. So let's use one. Let's use this one. So this video was about me. I was messing around trying to draw my timeline or my to-do list for the day, and I ended up my pencil case fell off and blah blah blah. And so I used that as sort of the thing. And my wife gave me a tip for how to make it so that this will never happen again. And it was great. And so I used the title "She Saved Me" as a sort of a title. But if I want to like maybe work on that a little bit and say I have no idea what I want to create as a title for the short, what would I do? Like you've talked about the modeling thing, and you talked about the model in terms of outliers, looking at the best, what's performing there. But then you also talk about the Dream 10 and the Model 10. Like, given you've got a Dream 10 and a Model 10 for this already, what would you go through to try and come up with a great title for a video like this?
So I'd first start with the topic. So I would make sure that your topic is about what your audience wants. So kind of the easiest way to do that is to just kind of scroll through your channel, like trying to figure out what are your kind of recent outliers, what's getting more views than all the other videos in your last your last 20, 30 videos, and trying to look for patterns there, and then looking at all of your dream 10. and all your competitors, like, all right, what's working for them in their last 30 videos, and then you sort by most popular, and you say, all right, what are my most popular videos, what are my competitors' most popular videos, and then once you look at all that stuff, hopefully you'll start to see patterns, and you'll be like, oh, like this, I'm finding like videos about early morning or like morning habits are working really well, or morning routines. So ideally you're starting with a proven topic, and then after we say, all right, well, we're gonna write titles about morning routine, then you would go and you would look at your Model 10, and you would say, like, all right, what's working well. You do kind of the same thing. You would look at their last 30 videos. All right, what is working well for them, and then you do that with all your Model 10 channels, and you try to look for patterns again. Except this time we're not looking at topics; we're looking at formats when you're looking at your Model 10. So that is how I would kind of run through that, and maybe we see that everybody's making a video about, like, um, the I regret not blah blah blah. So you might say, I regret not trying this productivity hack earlier, or I guess going back to the morning routine thing, like you might say, I regret not trying this morning routine earlier. So that would be how I would kind of use that process. But for this video specifically, um, you would kind of think, like, all right, what does my audience want? What are their hopes and dreams and fears here? Who is my audience? And those are all different elements that you could use to write a good title there.
So I'm just thinking, as you're saying this, you're probably going to be better off if you do this work before you actually create your video or videos. You'd already have this research in place, and then the natural thinking that comes from that is that you wouldn't write your title afterwards. You write it beforehand. Does that make sense? Is that what you recommend? It's like, so I know a lot of people do that as well. They actually come up with the title and their thumbnail before they actually go ahead and create the video. And I think probably most people do the other way around. What's your take on that?
Yeah. In an ideal world, you definitely write the title before you actually make the video. And that's because, like I said, like, you need to start with a proven topic, and then you need to start with a proven format. So let's say we come up with, I regret not trying this morning routine before. Um, that has to deliver on the promise that you make in your video. And if you don't, like, that's how you kind of land yourself in clickbait territory. Or maybe, you find some awesome title, and your content doesn't quite deliver on that promise, but like you stick that title on your video anyway, and it's like, that you start to get into clickbait territory that way. So
Mm.
yeah, in an ideal world, you'll come up with the title first. However, that's not always possible. For podcasts, for example, you don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, so it's a little bit harder for you to title a podcast. Vlogs, and I guess some other experiments. You just don't know exactly what's going to happen, so it is a little bit harder. In that case, I would probably try to write 5 titles that I think are going to happen, and then I would try to steer the conversation, or steer whatever events it is, in one of those directions. That'll also help you create good content, is because you thought of all these awesome examples that people would like beforehand, and then you can make content that delivers on those cool promises. But then also, and this is something that not enough people talk about, when we're talking about YouTube titles specifically, is what do we title our video, or sorry, what do we focus our title on? Because there's a bunch of different things that we could focus our title on. We could describe our video, which I think most people assume that their YouTube title should describe their video, but it's not necessarily the case. The biggest job of a title is to get people to click. The title might also set expectations. It might call out the right audience, but the number one goal is to get people to click, not to describe your video. Um, and then your thumbnail probably adds some more context, also sets expectations, also calls out the right audience, and then your intro sets more context. It sets more expectations, and also confirms who the video is for, and then you kind of get in your content. But yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, you're coming up with your titles beforehand, and yeah, I mean you're playing the game on hard mode if you try to write your titles after.
That's really interesting. I think that's a common mistake for people to create their videos first to, before they even have their titles or even their topic ideas in place, and then try and, tidy it up afterwards, after the fact. It's almost like putting what do you call it, putting a lipstick on a pig or something like that, an expression. Not sure if that's an English
Exactly.
expression, something like that. Now, what's interesting is you're this kind of guy who's been focusing in and honing in on titles in particular, and you've done a ton of research. You've got all this, you're a data guy, right? I think, isn't your channel sort of named YouTube Nerds Unite or something like that, right? So you
Yeah.
love data, but you've also been taking all this information and experience, and been creating software around this. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your software? That sounds really interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked a lot about the Dream 10 and the Model 10 in my software that is like launching, I believe tonight, as we're the
Oh
day that we're
yeah,
recording this.
good luck.
Yeah, thank you. So you can follow channels and you can create lists of channels that you follow. So when you sign up, we kind of all automatically set you up with a competitors list and an inspiration list. I use the terms competitors list and inspiration list because Dream 10 and Model 10 were a little bit too ambiguous. But you can create any other list you want. But yeah, so trying to make that easier. So I mean, it makes a lot of the stuff that we talked about today a lot easier. So like I just told you, like go look through all your competitors' last 30 videos and try to see what works. Well, like in my new software, you can just have one single feed of all of your competitors, and then you can filter by outlier score, or filter by views, and like only see what works there. So we're making that a lot easier for you. And then as far as like kind of coming up with like the different angle, when you use our AI, like it's programmed to first help you come up with different angles for your titles, and then you can kind of dive deeper into a different angle, and that'll help you really kind of think more strategically about your title, not just like kind of describing your title, but trying to think outside of the box and just show you a bunch of different ways that you could potentially title your video. And then a huge thing that I'm a big fan of is just previewing, like, all right, how does a title and thumbnail like actually look together? So we have a little studio tool where you can preview what it'll look like on YouTube. You can share it with friends. So I have a Discord group of three other guys, and that's probably like the highest investment, like or like the most ROI thing that I do when it comes to growing my YouTube, is that they're all like really smart guys, and all three of us, we're all three pretty successful on YouTube, and we all think we know what we're talking about. But almost every single one of us, when we suggest a title like, "Hey, I'm going to make a video about this," almost every single time, somebody else in the group says, "Well, haven't you thought about this?" And it's such a better idea. Even though we're all really good at YouTube, the ideas that we come with, like somebody always has a better idea for us. So
Mm.
that's just that's a huge value add. And I feel like if I could tell like anybody who is starting a channel, like go and find a group of two, three, four other people who are doing something kind of similar to you, and get in a group chat, get a Discord, Slack, whatever it is, and just like meet every week and share ideas, share what you're learning. And I mean, it's been crazy valuable for me. So anyway, in my new tool, you can take a screenshot of all the different titles and thumbnail combos, or you can just like download a JPEG and then you can share it. So to try to make that a little bit easier, because oftentimes I'll send my buddies like a bunch of screenshots, like, "Hey, like, what do you think about this or this or this or this?" And this kind of does that all in one
Mm.
place. So I really just said, "All right, what is my process, and how can I use software to just make that easier?"
Awesome. Now, I definitely want to send people to the right place to go and check that out. But before we do this, one last thing I want to ask you, Jake, and because you mentioned the thumbnail thing, I know thumbnails is not really a big thing with YouTube Shorts in particular, but My gut feeling is, my prediction is that they're going to bring back thumbnails for YouTube eventually. So when they do, and I know there's a hack as well for adding your own thumbnails in YouTube Shorts in particular. Other platforms like Instagram that do allow you to have thumbnails and stuff like that. But for the day when they do bring it back, or for those who are using the, a little bit of a hack to get their thumbnail in there, what's your advice for, titles and thumbnails? And I know you're long form, but if you could put your head on for short form, I think the psychology is probably still the same. But what sort of things is important for you to look at when you're developing both the title and the thumbnail for your videos?
Yeah, I mean, I think of them as complementary. It's like a kind of one-two punch. The how I view it is that like the thumbnail grabs the audience's attention, and then the title kind of confirms. So someone's like, "Oh, what is? I see this interesting thumbnail. Now let me read the title." And then the title. Then once they read the title, they're like, "Oh yes, this does sound interesting. I do want to watch this video." So I believe, like, we look at a ton of thumbnails, and we read a ton of titles. So they're both very important. I've heard mixed things on which is more important. I've heard people that I respect greatly argue for both sides. Personally, as a YouTube title guy, I think titles are more important. But and it also, it also depends on your niche. I think generally speaking, educational channels, the title is more important. For entertainment channels where you're doing something crazy, the thumbnail is more important. That's a little title versus thumbnail tangent rant there. But really, just how can I grab the right audience's attention and then build curiosity or excitement or fear and desire, so that they are like, oh my gosh, what is this video? I have to read this title. I have to decide if I want to click on this video.
I had a quick look at your software, the previous version of it, and I think I'm not sure if I saw it there or maybe I heard you talk about it, but the difference between, or one big difference between your title of your video and the text that you use on your video for your thumbnail. In general, it's a lot shorter, right? So you try and do it like in 3, maybe 5 max words on your thumbnail. And I think with short form, where you've got a vertical sort of thing, and it's often smaller on people's mobile screens, and you probably want to go even shorter, maybe 2 words, maybe 3 words. Any thoughts on that?
I think that it's very hard for me to give you a hard line. And that's, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is Diary of a CEO's channel, their YouTube channel. I haven't looked at their channel in a while, but they were doing like 5, 6, 7, 8 words. And I've heard so many people say, oh, you should never have more than 4 words or never have more than 3 words. So, I mean, things kind of come and go. I think what's almost more important is the psychology. Like if you have some, an insane copy or insane thumbnail text, and people read it and like, oh my gosh, what in the world is this? I have to watch this video. Then yeah, you could probably get away with more. But I mean, just thinking about, all right, what mode is my audience in? Who is my audience? Typically older people have more patience and they read more, whereas younger people just seem to scroll a little bit faster. So that's just a couple of different things to consider. So, if your audience is in scroll mode, then yeah, you probably want to be as short and concise, but also, as powerful as possible. So yeah, I mean, that's a huge topic that's up for debate, and it really just kind of, it depends. However, if you were asking me that question, I would say, hey, go look at your Dream 10 and your Model 10. How many words do they have in their thumbnails? Go follow that.
I think that's a golden framework or strategies. Just to me, it's like a shortcut. Just look at the Dream 10 and the Model 10, and that almost gives you all the answers. It's
kind of like my cop out for everything.
Right. Jake, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for all your incredible insights when it comes to titles, and also for your generosity to talk about how that might apply to short form video as well. I think pretty much 99% of the advice applies to short form video as well, which is really cool. I'm really intrigued about your software. I can't wait to see the next version of it coming out. Where's the best place for people to learn more about you and your software that you're developing right now? And where should we send them?
Yeah, so you can search social Jake Thomas, LinkedIn, YouTube, or Twitter, and then creatorhooks.com is the newsletter, and then app.creatorhooks.com right now is for the software, but that will
Ooh.
be changing. Like I said, we haven't launched yet, so gonna clean that up a little bit. But
Okay, so this is a place they can go to see well, actually, I think I'm logged in here. Maybe I don't
there
know.
it is.
There's the software.
You're not logged in, but there it is.
Okay, very cool. So people could go there, and once this goes out, that'll probably be ready for launch, I'd imagine. But
I
otherwise,
mean, technically, it's ready today.
Okay, right. I do recommend people go to creatorhooks.com as well. I had a quick look at your past editions here, and you practice what you preach when you look at the titles you have written there. Really, really cool. Definitely check it out. And this was interesting to me as well. I know that you don't have a ton of subscribers here on YouTube, but I actually started watching some of your videos here, and I think it's just a matter of time for these to take off, because you go through all these really amazing frameworks and things for writing titles. Definitely recommend that as well. So creatorhooks.com, Jake's YouTube channel, just Jake Thomas, or Jake Thomas YouTube is the handle. Also, if you go to X, if you just search for Jake Thomas, because it's actually at J Thomas _, right? Or something like that.
Oh
But if
yeah.
you just...
Well, I didn't. I didn't think that I was going to create content when I was like, oh, I'm just
Right.
gonna, just kind of lurk on Twitter. And then one day I was like, I should probably try to grow my business on Twitter. And then by that time it was too late. I was stuck with the double underscore.
Right.
So
But
good thing I got a handsome dog in there.
yeah, I did notice if I just searched for Jake Thomas, you come up as the first result for me. So yeah, get the one with the dog, and then you're on the right place. That's awesome. Jake, thank you so much. I know we could probably talk about this for many more hours, especially when it comes to honing in and talking about the interaction between your thumbnails and the titles. And then I'd be interested if you if you'd ever get down to researching titles and thumbnails specifically for short form. And if you do let me know. I'd love to get you back on the show and find out if you found anything different to report on. But
I will.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I wish you all the best for your launch.
Yeah, thank you, Gideon.
Take care. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to grow your influence with daily short form videos, Vubli makes it effortless. Post everywhere, be seen everywhere. Try it free at vubli.ai. I'll see you in the next episode.